What's up, guys, and welcome to this week's FAQ in Freebie Friday. Now, for those of you new to our channel, these videos are all about answering your health-related questions. So basically, if you have a question concerning your health, something regarding nutrition, herbalism, or really anything related to holistic health and wellness, and you feel we could help you answer that question, all you have to do is leave your questions in the comment section below, and we'll be answering those based on popularity, the questions that we feel will be most beneficial to the whole community, and of course the questions that we are capable of giving an honest answer to. Something else great about these videos is that every week from the comment section, we select one lucky person to win a free bag of medicinal mushrooms or tonic herbs of their choice. So even if you don't have a question for us this week, but you'd like to be entered to win some free herbs, all you have to do is make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and just drop any comment in the comment section. And with all of that being said, let's get to this week's questions. All right, so getting to the first question that I'd like to answer today, this one reads, can you talk about the importance of low stomach acid and how it contributes to autoimmune diseases? All right, so this is a fantastic question. It's actually something that I used to talk about frequently, especially when I was making my perfect digestion course. It's one of the major contributing factors to all sorts of digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, disrupted or weak detoxification functions in the body, and as you mentioned, low immunity. So basically there's four major systems in the body, at least ones that I think of. There is the digestive system, the metabolism, the immune system, the detoxification system, and they are all interrelated. They all affect one another, but at the top of them are the metabolism and digestion. Generally speaking, as the metabolism slows down, so does the digestive function, the digestive movements, the transition of bowel time, so the amount of time it takes for you to eat something, then eliminate it, as well as the general breaking down of the food, the secretion of digestive fluids and enzymes, etc. When the digestive system starts to slow down, this is going to, in the most basic sense, slow down the functioning of the immune system and detoxification system. So that's the broad way of looking at it. As the metabolism slows, from a wide variety of factors. This could be from consuming a low-calorie diet. Generally speaking, people that tend to diet a lot, they don't consume a lot of calories, they're always in a calorie deficit. People that fast a lot usually have a slower metabolic rate, which is otherwise promoted as a good thing for these types of people, or at least from this body of knowledge. But as the metabolism or the metabolic rate gets slower, so will the rate of digestion, and this will, again, ultimately weaken the immune system. But more specifically, how low digestive function or weak digestive function, or specifically low stomach acid production, can contribute to autoimmune-like conditions has a lot to do with the inability to efficiently break down the food that you're eating, especially the proteins. So first and foremost, let's look at what autoimmunity is in very simple terms. Autoimmunity means that your immune system is basically on automatic. The basic job of the immune system is to detect foreign invaders, things like pathogens, bacteria, viruses, toxins, etc., and then stimulate the secretion of certain immune cells to otherwise destroy those things, so that way they don't damage your cells and tissues and break down your body. So in an autoimmune-like condition, the immune system's basically firing off all the time. It's on automatic, if you will. So even if there's not necessarily a recognizable virus or strain of pathogen or something in the body, the immune system's still attacking healthy cells and tissues. In digestive diseases and digestive dysfunction is actually one of the major contributing factors to this. And the basic reason for this is that when you're not fully breaking down or digesting your food, especially proteins, this can lead to inflammation in the gut. The simple way of looking at it is that if you don't have the enzymes or the acid to break down your proteins, then you can actually stimulate the proliferation or the growth of bacterial organisms in the gut, especially in the small intestine. So look at it like this. You consume food, and once it goes through the mouth and the esophagus, it ends up in the stomach. And the stomach is usually an acidic environment, and things like pepsin, which make the pH of the stomach really acidic, stimulates the secretion of hydrochloric acid to break down those proteins. If you've ever noticed while chewing a protein-rich source of food, something like meat or even a nut or seed, it doesn't really melt in your mouth the way like a carbohydrate does. And this is because there's not really any protein enzymes or acids in your mouth or saliva. Those are all in the stomach. So the great majority of your proteins actually dissolved and torn apart in the stomach, taking proteins and turning them into amino acids or otherwise liquefying that protein to be then passed along to the small intestine, where it's generally absorbed through the intestinal wall and starts going to work, performing all the necessary things that you need those nutrients and that nutrition to do. However, when the stomach acid is low, you're going to have impartial or indigested foods that enter the small intestine, and this is where the bacteria start to proliferate. And those bacteria are trying to break down that unprocessed or undigested food that the stomach failed to digest, and through that process, in short, inflammation can be created. Basically, as bacteria are eating up the food in the small intestine, you get this condition of SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and their digestive waste. The bacteria's digestive waste is typically referred to as bacterial endotoxin or lipopolysaccharides. It's like metabolic waste from bacteria that like surrounds the outer cell of it. And this can damage the intestinal wall, leading to leakiness, or leaky gut it's usually referred to, or intestinal permeability. So at this point, a lot of things are getting past the intestinal wall into the bloodstream where they don't belong. You could call them bowel toxins. So those bowel toxins are going to be stimulating an immune response, an inflammatory response. And that's usually how low stomach acid is going to, in a very simple way, contribute to the automatic firing of the immune system. So again, it's largely due by just poor digestion. Low stomach acid is one of the major causes of this, but keep in mind there's other causative factors. One of the major reasons that people have low stomach acid is stress. That's perhaps the number one cause of digestive issues. When your body's stressed out, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the stress system, your body's not going to secrete hydrochloric acid, let alone any digestive enzymes really. Your body's not prepared to digest food. So that's one of the major causes. The second major cause is actually, I would say, what's more probable is a low-calorie diet or things that generally suppress the metabolic rate. So again, if you're somebody who's always dieting, if you're always fasting, if you're always on a cleanse or a detox, your metabolic rate is going to be slow. That's going to decrease the rate and secretion of digestive juices and hydrochloric acid. Next to that, other than having a slow or sluggish metabolism, another major causative factor for low stomach acid is an inadequate protein intake. So you need protein, dietary protein, to make hydrochloric acid. And a lot of people today, especially vegans and vegetarians, they're told you don't need much protein, but the fact of the matter is your liver loves protein, your body loves protein, and the more stressed out you are, the greater your requirements for protein are. And most people today are generally stressed out. If they're not stressed out mentally and emotionally, they're stressed out environmentally because of the estrogenic, modern, toxic world. So low protein intake is the major reason, but also nutritional deficiencies like low calcium, which is a huge one for people. A lot of people are calcium deficient because of the dogmas around dairy. Another major nutritional deficiency is a zinc deficiency, again, largely because of like vegan movements, because the richest sources of zinc are things like oysters and beef and organ meats, things that people don't tend to consume really, especially if you're vegan or vegetarian. And then B vitamin deficiencies, again, which are usually most abundant in animal products. So in addition to generally being stressed out, having a low metabolic rate from dieting, low-calorie diet, protein deficiency, a zinc, calcium, and vitamin B deficiency are all major reasons that stomach acid is not being properly produced. And this can lead to autoimmunity, basically by decreasing your body's ability to break down food, increasing your body's reliance on the bacterial organisms in your intestine to try to break it down, which will lead to inflammation over the long term, damaging your intestines and causing bowel toxins to seep through the intestinal wall, triggering an immune response. And then there's actually a lot of other issues that occur after that. It becomes a very vicious cycle because the bacterial endotoxins can stimulate estrogen. That estrogen can stimulate the adrenal glands, producing stress substances, putting your body in more stress, further perpetuating this vicious cycle. So for many people, it's sort of a difficult pattern to break, and it takes some time. So my tips for you on this is obviously going back to these causative factors. Consume enough calories. Do whatever you can to minimize your total stress load. So watch our other videos on stress. You're also going to want to increase your intake of dietary protein. And unfortunately, again, if you're vegan or vegetarian, the least inferior forms of protein and the most nutritious, the least allergenic, tend to be animal products. Of course, I'm not talking about conventional feedlot animal products, but good quality, pastured, organic meats, organ meats, eggs, dairy are fantastic sources that the body generally tends to recognize, and they don't have those plant toxins that tend to make them difficult to digest. But in addition to that, if you don't want to go that route, then I would highly recommend consuming a lot of well-cooked potatoes and mushrooms, which tend to have very clean sources of protein. So you could get your protein from those. You're just going to need to probably eat a lot of them. So in addition to increasing your calorie intake, your protein intake, lowering stress, you're going to want to make sure you're getting those micronutrients, the calcium, the zinc, and the B vitamins. Unfortunately, a lot of the supplemental forms of those are inferior. They're allergenic. So your best sources are always food. So the best sources of calcium, if you don't want to go the dairy route, are going to be well-cooked kale and nettle leaf. However, again, still in many ways inferior to good quality raw dairy. Zinc, again, I don't really think there's a really good source of non-animal zinc. Even Polyrhacus black ant is an insect. So I usually recommend for vegans, if you don't want to eat oysters, shellfish, or red meat, at least supplement with the Polyrhacus black ant to get the zinc. It's not an animal. It's not necessarily a plant either, but it's an insect, and that can be beneficial for the environment in other ways. And your B vitamins, very similar. If your intestines are healthy, your intestines will probably produce enough B vitamins, but if you have low stomach acid, you probably don't have healthy enough intestines to create those. So again, the B vitamins are usually highest in animal sources and shellfish. And in addition to those longer term solutions, I have two simple things you can do on the short end. You can take an herb like Chinese bitters, which will help to stimulate the production of your own hydrochloric acid. So you can take that just before a meal. You can also do things like take a little bit of apple cider vinegar to make your stomach environment more acidic. And another really good simple tip would be don't consume liquids, especially water, while you're eating. This is a very basic Ayurvedic tip, because if you're consuming too much water while you're eating, this can have many negative effects, but particularly in regards to digestion, it can dilute the environment, the acidic environment in the stomach. So those are a few short-term tips that could help out, as well as applying the other long-term tips. All right, moving along. The second question I want to answer today is, how can I get clean water without it being a great expense or buying a lot of plastic? So what I do personally, and this might be more difficult for you depending on your location or your region, but if you haven't heard of the website findaspring.com, it is awesome. Basically, you can search your state and your local area for any nearby springs. And a lot of these places too, they'll actually have people who comment on recent up-to-date testing. So people will go and test the water for heavy metals and pesticides and things like that, and give you, some insight as to how clean the water is. But I'd imagine that most wild spring water is going to be cleaner than anything you'd buy at a store, unless of course it's like distilled reverse osmosis water, which generally strips everything out of it. So if you can do that, what I do is I have a spring actually just right up here, up by the mountain. It's just coming off from mountain snow, basically, that's melting into a stream. So it's super clean water from what I know of. And there's a couple of other nearby ones that are a little further away. And all you have to do, it's like a one-time investment. It's a little bit more expensive up front, but you buy a 5-gallon glass jug like this, and you just go fill them up. And you can get, over time, the glass ones are a little bit more expensive than the BPA-free ones, but I go with the glass, although they're heavier, because even the BPA-free ones tend to have other estrogenic substances in them. But it's not the biggest thing in the world if you want to save a little bit of money. Remember, everything's about a balance. You can't avoid estrogens altogether. You're always going to be exposed to some sort of toxin somewhere in life. So, it depends on your situation. If buying 5 of the glass ones is going to cause you financial and psychological stress, then just spare yourself that stressing. Go with those plastic BPA-free ones. At least you're not buying a new plastic water gallon every single day. You're making a one-time purchase, and then that's it, and you're getting free water, and probably some of the best water you can get. The second option I have for you, if you can't do that, if there's not a spring in your area, for example, is sort of a modification of this to save the expense of buying bottled water. So if you buy a gallon of water every single day, not only are you buying that plastic jug every day, that's probably not BPA free and contributing to the industrial production of plastic, but it's also way more expensive to do that. So my second tip for you would be to still invest in some of those glass jugs, or if you have, recycled glass jugs, like let's say if you buy like a glass gallon of apple juice or something like that, whatever containers that you have, actually, just take them to pretty much any grocery store, if you are in America, of course, and they have these bulk glacier water dispensers that are, I think, reverse osmosis filtered. Some of them have different options on them, but they're generally anywhere from 25 cents to 50 cents a gallon, which is a fraction of the cost of buying it from the store in a gallon. So that's a really good option as well. That's something that I'll do sometimes if the spring's ever frozen, or if I just don't feel like going to the spring and I'm in town. All right, so I want to answer one and final question, and eventually I'll get to all these because I'm seeing that the questions are getting more lengthy than normal. So I'll get around to all these questions in future videos, so don't worry if I didn't answer your question in this one. But this question reads, would you recommend that we become more of a fat burner instead of a glucose or sugar burner? Seems all in one these days. Cheers. So the long story short, and if you watch these videos, I talk about this a lot. Basically, your cells prefer to oxidize or metabolize sugar or glucose. Glucose is the preferred energy of the cell. And here's something that I find to be very fascinating, and something that, again, a lot of people that don't really ever make the distinction between burning fat and just naturally excreting or losing fat. There's a big difference between those things. To burn fat, as people promote in like ketogenic diets, requires the production of adrenaline and norepinephrine. So burning fat is actually a stress state. That's what's happening to a diabetic when they're not oxidizing glucose and they're in this wasting condition. They're wasting a lot of muscle, a lot of fat, a lot of tissues and organs, is because it's getting burned up by adrenaline and norepinephrine. So basically, in order to enter this state to become a fat burner, you have to deplete the body of its sugar reserves, which stimulates your liver to send a signal to the pituitary and the adrenal gland to then release or produce adrenaline and norepinephrine, classic stress substances, which then mobilize fat from the body through a process called lipolysis in order to eventually be burned up to create an alternative fuel source or substrate. So it's not actually an ideal state for your body. So despite the popularity of dietary ketosis and the widespread popularity of burning fat here in America, that is always a stressful condition by your body. Any animal in nature, if you look around, the last thing that those animals want is to be burning fat. When a bear is hibernating, it's in lipolysis. It's burning fat, surviving off its fat reserves. And when they wake up, they're diabetic and hypothyroid. And again, this is because of the stress of burning fat for fuel. Your body doesn't want to have to survive off its own tissues. Preferably, your cells could get glucose, have the ability to efficiently oxidize it, and then use it for cellular functions, because a lot of the cells and certain organs in your body can't efficiently sub in fatty acids for energy in the first place, which is why diabetics tend to have so many degenerative symptoms, because your body relies basically on glucose. It relies on it so much it will waste its own organs just to make it. So I don't think there's any glorification to burning fat. I think the only reason why it's become so popular here in America is because nobody's talking about the true physiology and what it takes to burn fat. Nobody really makes the discernment between burning fat and just naturally excreting fat via the functioning of the liver and healthy muscle tissue and androgens in the body. So you don't necessarily need to burn fat to lose it. What you just want to do is make sure that you're healthy enough, stress-free enough to where you can actually oxidize glucose in all of your substrates, so that way they're not storing as fat in the first place. Not to mention that here in the West, people are obsessed with weight loss and fat loss and being skinny or ripped or something, and nobody really talks about the stress that that puts on your body. So I don't necessarily recommend becoming a fat burner, relying on fat for fuel, especially when the fatty acids can't be turned into glucose, so they tend to just circulate through the system, stimulating estrogen and causing all sorts of issues. And only the glycerols can be used as sugar. So considering that fats, only half of their chemical makeup can be even used as sugar, it makes more sense to just consume good quality types of carbohydrates or sugars, usually things that are easier to digest, like fruits and simpler sugars actually. And also because of the reliance of adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol to stay in a high rate of lipolysis to be a fat burner in the first place, people are going to see the degenerative effects of that in about 1 to 6 years. So a lot of the people right now, ketosis as a dietary fad has not been out for very long, but in about 1 to 6 years, people will start to see how those stress substances, the adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol, being chronically elevated will start to wear down and break down their body. In fact, you can just look at somebody. If you've ever seen somebody that like had a decent amount of weight on them and they lost the weight really fast, they tend to actually look a lot more aged. And this is, again, because of the reliance of stress substances to burn fat. Stress substances like adrenaline and norepinephrine, they burn fat, but having a good functioning thyroid, a good androgen to estrogen ratio would just ensure that you're able to oxidize your food, the nutrients in your food, so that way you don't store fat and you don't have to rely on stress to basically get rid of any stored fat or foods and nutrients that weren't properly metabolized. So I think it's a poor solution to a problem that people aren't really addressing. There's other underlying issues that people tend to overlook when they go on these diets, like the fact that they're probably hypothyroid, the fact that their adrenal glands are probably incredibly hyperactive and they're secreting a lot of stress substances in the first place, amongst other factors. So I personally wouldn't recommend it, just considering those basic parts of the physiological process of being a fat burner. I would personally recommend that people learn a bit more about how their metabolism works and how to improve the overall functioning of the thyroid and their whole metabolic system instead. Anyways, that brings this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday to a close. We have a lot of other questions I want to get to in next week's videos. So again, I'll definitely be sure to catch up on all these and make sure I get everybody's questions answered. I might even just respond to you in the comment section. So definitely check the comment section from previous videos to see if I've responded to you. You can also click that little bell button, which will send you an email, I think, anytime we respond to you as well. That'll also be helpful if you're interested in winning some free herbs. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you've liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new here. And if you'd like to win some free herbs, you know what to do. Just make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and drop a comment or question in the comment section below.